Welcome back to the Eric Krown crypto channel. Wishing you a happy and healthy start to this nice Monday morning over here as we get prepared for a big week. A big week, you say? Yes, indeed. It's going to be all over the thumbnails, but yes, it actually is probably going to be a big week. Why is that? Because we got two major events coming up, of which one starts tomorrow, Tuesday. That's going to be CPI prints coming out right before US Open. And then we got the FOMC meeting where Jay Powell is going to get on the old horn again and do his thing, which is very likely to produce volatility. So today is probably going to be more or less a range day, I suspect, but I do want to present some statistical setups and some things on the higher term timeframes that I do think, deserve some highlight here. Other than that, I do want to let you know that Elsa's having a bit of a surgery today. So if you're emailing support for whatever reason, she's probably gonna, it's probably gonna take some time to get back to you. Everything's all good, by the way, just so you know. It's it's a very simple thing, but she will be a bit under the weather for at least today, probably even tomorrow as well. All right, sweet. So other than that, let's just jump right into it. I wanted to start off today's analysis with the HPDR indicator because there is a bit of a setup going on right now, of which this is the same sort of strategy that I presented on last week's video with the HPDR indicator. If you have the HPDR indicator, or if you're in the quant program, you have access to that, as well as a short strategy as well. But in this case, we have a potential for a long strategy. Now, I want to say right at the outset that just visually looking at this at the higher term timeframes doesn't look like it's going to play to me. But in my experience, my opinion of what's most likely to happen when looking at these statistical setups is completely irrelevant to what actually does happen, simply because I've seen these things just, pop out of nowhere to meet their targets and also dump out of, and also go the other way, out of nowhere to completely negate it as well. Anyways, in this case, what essentially is the setup? Well, we have a closure below the bottom side of the 50% blue range lows here. That's going to be this area right here. Again, accompanied by these stats right here. Let me just get rid of that because that's a little bit of an eyesore. And then after that, that initiates the next portion of that strategy setup, which is looking at a decline on the moving average of volatility represented by the BBWP indicator right here. That happens officially on this bar, and that was right here. And of course, after that happens, we can then go reference the statistics overlaid in this pane. This is for the 30-minute time frame, as that's what we're looking at right now. And we can go, look at the hit rate given this particular setup, which is 74% over the past 50 iterations. So pretty high, I would say. What I'm next most interested in is the average percentage gain that we kind of expect from this, alongside the first standard deviation, and then the time associated on average with these playing out. So the time is about 5 hours. So that basically brings us to around US market open. Surprise, surprise. That's typically how it works out. And then also the average gain would be about 1.57%, which we'll measure out in a second here, but I also do want to bring into the focus the first standard deviation for these results as well, for the win side, that is, for the win side, of which that gives us a pretty large range. There's a big variance in the data right here, obviously, as little as spot 20 all the way up to as much as 3%, basically. Anyways, if we were to take the average in this case from the actual signal given, well, 1.5% puts you basically back around yesterday's highs, or yesterday's range, essentially. 17,200 to 17,150. On the lower end, if we were to see like a very anemic response from this, that would put you basically back around 16,950, really crazy right there. And on the upper end, if we were to see a 3% move, that would put Bitcoin closer to 17,400, just doing some bad mental math right there. Anyways, again, I say that, and while looking at price action, it's like, nice. That would be nice, but I'm not so sure about it. Anyways, we can now go cross-reference stochastic momentum just to see, where the pivots are, what corroborates that story, and is there more to it? So let's actually go over here to spot price action for today. And we can see, starting off with let's actually start off with the daily. The daily time frame will actually be continuing with downside momentum as long as Bitcoin's below 17,040. And by the way, the daily for CME and spot are very, very close right here. In fact, we'll just go to CME. Why not, man? 12-hour time frame is going to be also turning to the downside if CME closes below 16,850 in the next 2 hours or so. 6-hour time frame is also going to be continuing with downside as long as Bitcoin's below 17,230. 4-hour time frame is going to be down as long as Bitcoin's below 17,200, and the hourly is going to be up, I believe. Yeah, it's probably gonna be up, and there it is, 16,850 going to be the magical number right there. So pretty much everything else is kind of against price action right now, or suggesting, you know, a leaning towards more downside. But what I like to do in this case is I'd like to go over here to the 4-hour time frame and just plot out the ranges. And what do you fucking know? It's the same ranges as last week as far as the 4-hour goes. To the downside, 16,650 on a closing basis versus about 17,350 to the upside. In this case, you know, could we see a test of the bottoms of the range and then a bounce from there? Definitely possible. But here's a thing that I really want to be adamant about. If you see a closure below these range lows, and let's just make it like 16,600, well, 16,650 is probably good enough, honestly. But if you do see a closure below those lows, very, very likely, we're going to see a move back down below 16,000 bucks in the coming day or two. Or maybe 3, who knows? But ultimately, I really want to hammer in the message that I've been having for a while now, in the sense that, hey, when we're talking about the higher term timeframes, not the fucking 4-hour and barely even the daily in this case, I still stick with what I've been saying, and I think that this chart actually represents it best. Yeah, the HPDR represents it best over here. While Bitcoin could very easily come back down to the current lows, let's call it like mid to upper $15,000 territory, I do still think that you would very likely see a greater bounce from this region to, you know, above 18,000 bucks, probably even towards 20,000 bucks before potentially continuing to new lows after that. I still stick with my sort of timing of that. If Bitcoin is going to make new macro lows, probably happens end of Q1 2022. So if it were to break again below, what was it, like 16,650, you're probably going to see something like this where it comes down to those lows, bounces from there, and what do you know? That's basically the bottom side of the 50% historical returns lows right there. It's a long way of saying probably going to bounce from that region, also be another higher low as well. And then of course, you know, kind of has to be looking at least somewhere around 18.5 if that were to happen. By the same token, you know, if Bitcoin were to, or what essentially would be relevant in the short term for the upside right now, obviously closing above the current range highs. But in the short term, you know, the only setup that I really see is on the 30-minute here, as you can, or as we went over earlier on this chart, not this time frame, but this chart on the HPDR indicator. Anyways, by the way, if you have the HPDR indicator, you have these stats for all the time frames tested for both long and short on that particular setup, and also for the people in the quant program. I don't know if I mentioned that or not already. Anyways, cool. So we've gone through that. The next thing that I want to go over is that again, you know, like if I'm just looking at the chart, does not look like it actually does want to pop back up there. But if I wanted to represent the downside case a little bit more, we do have regular phantom bearish divergence coming on from the last high alongside very low BBWP, and even the 12-hour jewel is probably about to turn down as well. So that'd be kind of like another downside impetus alongside the stochastic momentum mostly being to the downside on all medium timeframes. Anyways, again, when we bifurcate the different timeframes, I do want to highlight that the higher term timeframes do suggest a bit of a different picture. So let's go over here to the weekly for, it doesn't really matter if we go to spot or CME, but in this case, I'll just go to spot. And what's interesting about this, or actually CME will get the job done. What's interesting about this is that the weekly stochastic momentum will actually turn to the upside at the end of this week if Bitcoin closes above 16,450. So that's going to be a big level to be watching throughout this week, especially coming into Friday, because if Bitcoin does close above that region, you will have not just bullish divergence on the weekly RSI, which we went over several times over the past weekend, but you also have 1, 2, 3 drives of bullish divergence coming from the last few weekly lows on the stochastic oscillator. So that would be the June lows, that would be the September lows, and that would be presumably the 16,000 or so lows that Bitcoin's trying to put in right now. So you'd see momentum turn up, also a bit of break, you know, of this momentum structure as well. And then of course, on top of that, to follow up on this chart, the 5-day volatility versus stochastic momentum chart, which I won't go through the setup on this one, but you know, this one did have a nice, well, not so much a nice signal, but did have a signal in early November. Now, admittedly, this signal was definitely disappointing compared to the rest of the data. It was not very actionable from the actual signal given. it was maybe like another 15% move, which is good, but it's not in alignment with the data, I'd say. So what is interesting about this? Well, the 5-day time frame, which should naturally lead the weekly, being that it is a slightly lower time frame, but still within the vicinity of it, is actually already going to be popping up as well based upon yesterday's closure, and it will continue with upside momentum as long as Bitcoin's basically above 15,900. And again, this would be a trendline regression rejection. And also that would essentially suggest that the prior setup is now done. It's nullified, or it's not nullified. I mean, it fucking happened, right? But it's done. And when it's done, what we have observed in the past is you typically get a mean reversion. And in this case, that would imply a bounce. So this would obviously be more long-term. And again, that can still account for a retest of the current lows like that, and then very likely a move somewhere at least into the mid-18s, probably more like the 20s if I had to guess. So yeah, I thought that was rather interesting. Anyways, that's a long way of saying that Bitcoin might go up, it might go down. Probabilities right now are on actually short-term upside, although, like I said, it doesn't look like it to me. Below 16,650 problems on a closing basis. Until then, I actually still favor the Bulos, I guess, just based off of statistics and whatnot. All right, cool. That's going to be it for me today. I want to be wishing you the best as always. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully soon.